Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. It has 843 acres, 24,000 trees, 7 bodies of water, 58 miles of pedestrian paths, over 9,000 benches, 21 playgrounds, and more than 35 million visitors a year. It is the first major urban park built in America, a National Historic Landmark. It is an American masterpiece. Indeed, it is the world's greatest urban park and a dynamic engine of economic and real estate growth. It's Central Park, and here to talk about the park as a physical place, a civic treasure, and as a statement of political and civic philosophy are Sara Cedar Miller, the official historian and photographer of the park, and Douglas Blonsky, the administrator of Central Park and the president of the Central Park Conservancy, the not-for-profit organization that has restored and maintained the park since 1980. He has been with the Conservancy since 1985. He was appointed president in 2004, and in 1998, he was appointed Central Park administrator. Sara and the Conservancy have recently published Seeing Central Park, the official guide to the world's greatest urban park, a follow-up on her absolutely gorgeous and beautiful 2003 book, Central Park, an American Masterpiece, about which she and I talked about right here in 2003. Welcome back, Sara. Welcome, Doug. Okay, congratulations. I really like this little book. I love the big book, but this book is in some ways a better book because I can carry it around and look at the pictures as I'm traveling through the park. But before we get to the park, let's talk about the Conservancy. What is it? What's its history?
Well, Doug, that's the million-dollar question for us. What is the Conservancy? Who is the Conservancy? Who are we? And the problem is, New York City, New Yorkers don't know who the Conservancy is.
That's why you're here.
And so we've been in existence since 1980. As you said, we're the not-for-profit that manages Central Park for the city of New York. We're the stewards of the park. We are the way New Yorkers can get involved with Central Park. It was very interesting. As you know, Central Park was a much different place back in the early 80s, back in the 70s.
When I grew up, it was a dangerous place, a really bad reputation, and a well-deserved bad reputation.
Yeah, exactly. It was a dangerous place. And you know what was happening? There were several not-for-profits were starting to pop up, or small little friends groups, to start taking the park back. And Gordon Davis, who was the parks commissioner at the time, he said, you know, I better pull these groups together so they're not all working against each other. And Betsy Barlow Rogers, who was the head of the Central Park Task Force, ended up becoming, it was a merger between the Central Park Community Fund, who was run by Dick Gilder and George Soros, and Betsy's group came together, and it was a merger of not-for-profits to create the Central Park Conservancy.
Well, and this Conservancy is really a result of the energy and interest of Betsy Barlow and then Betsy Barlow Rogers, in a sense where one individual can really take an idea and make profound changes in the city. Absolutely,
and it was about accountability. You know, there was nobody accountable for Central Park. You couldn't figure out what the budget was. You couldn't figure out who was there was no chief operating officer or chief executive officer. And there was actually a study done in the 70s by Soros and Gilder that basically said that what was really lacking in Central Park was accountability and a board of guardians. And so that was really the beginning.
And that's what you do. Specifically on a day-to-day basis, what do you do? Oh. And how many people work for you? These are the folks who wear the bright green shirts, right?
Well, we just changed the color.
Oh, you changed?
Intentionally. I mean, you know, we need to get the word out that it is the Conservancy. We have these very pretty now gray shirts and kind of a new logo and a new look, and it's much more fresh. But we do everything from picking up the trash, to taking care of the special events, to doing the horticulture, to making sure the 58 miles of pathways are clean of snow so you can go use the park, and we get that done first thing in the morning. We're responsible for almost everything in the park except the police. And we have a wonderful police precinct in Central Park, so we partner with them. And also the Parks Department has their PEP officers.
Okay, talk about the Conservancy's relationship to the city, particularly the Department of Parks and Rec?
Well, we really report to the city. You know, Adrian Benepy, the Parks Commissioner, I have a dotted line reporting structure to him as the administrator of the park, and I report to the board of the Conservancy as the president of the Conservancy. So the Parks Department sets the policy. Okay.
Talk about an example of them setting policy and then you implementing it.
You know, some of the major events in the park, you know, are set by the Parks Department. They want us to do this. They'll talk to us about, hey, can we do this event?
Right.
Will it work? Will it hurt the park? And we'll give them our feedback, and then we work together to put it on. But I think events are a good one. Concessions are another good one. The Parks Department really does do the concessions in the park, but again, we work very closely with them because we want to bring some of the best food to people.
How many people work for you?
I have about 300 Conservancy employees, and we still have about 25 city employees that report together to report to me in the park.
Well, my favorite one of your staff members is Sara Cedar Miller. What's your job description? I mean, you may have the best job of anybody I've ever interviewed, the historian and photographer of the park.
I'd like to hear this answer too.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And give her a raise. Come on. Go ahead.
He's already done that.
Oh, okay.
Very nicely. He's already promoted me to Associate Vice President
Oh,
of the Conservancy as well. But in fact, my job is really to do the photography, everything from, you know, copying plans if that needs to be, although we have scanners now, to fundraising events and, of course, the good and the bad parts of the park that we need to fix. I do a lot of writing now since the books came out for Doug in particular. But I roam the park with my camera and I give tours to raise money for the Conservancy, and you're welcome to come on one.
Oh, are you kidding me? I'm
me?
definitely coming on.
Okay.
What was your wait a second? What was your first photograph?
My first photograph of the park was of in Conservatory Garden. It was Brides Magazine coming back to photograph people who had gotten married a year ago or something. I can't even remember, but there was a big cake. That's all in the shape of the garden. And I'd never heard of Conservatory Garden. It was actually not my first day of work yet, because on Friday I got a call to report on Monday, and 3 hours later I got a call, could I come on Saturday? And I thought, you know, this isn't going to be a typical job.
And you've loved it. Wait, you said off camera that you met your wife in Central Park?
Yeah, absolutely. My office when I first started in 1985 was where the birdhouse at the zoo was, which is now the zoo gift shop.
Right.
And that's where we had our offices. And she actually was a landscape architect, the same as I am, and she worked for the Parks Department. And so she kind of was our job captain for the park. So I had to report to her. So it was kind of tough.
But you said that in a little smirking kind of way.
Took
You're
a
gonna
couple
be in
years.
trouble.
It took a couple years
for her to train you and get you into shape. I can understand that. One of my absolute favorite quotes of the Central Park, an American masterpiece, is your introduction, Sara. And let me just read it. Central Park is the most important work of American art of the 19th century. In the visual arts, no single painting, sculpture, or structure can compare with this unique and long recognized masterpiece of landscaped architecture. So this is a work of art.
It is a work of art.
And it's an underappreciated work of art?
Absolutely. I mean, people have always said that the park is a work of art, but the designers made it very clear that they were artists. And what's interesting is they are artists, landscape architects I have such tremendous respect for, because they may never see their work of art in full completion.
Wow, that's true.
And Olmsted and Vaux did live long enough to actually see it and constantly complain about it, the way it was being managed. But aside from that, the park is, I'm a trained art historian. I went on to college and got my master's degree.
Go CUNY.
Therefore, I'm happy to be on CUNY TV because
and you're most welcome.
I'm such a CUNY fan and member of the family. But, you know, I was trained to interpret works of art. And what was wonderful about Central Park, an American masterpiece, is the fact that no art historian had ever studied Central Park. And everyone alluded to the fact that it was a work of art, but no one actually spelled it out. And that was what I think was the important contribution of this.
Talk about it as a work of art. I mean, you note, except for the rock outcroppings, everything in the park is man-made. It's an artificial construct, and as we'll show the photos, it can't be. As you walk through it, it can't be. You're lying.
That's right. I mean, even myself, I thought it was, you know, a piece of Manhattan. They put a wall around it, put a few paths and benches in, but the water bodies are man-made, and they're nothing more than your kitchen sink or your bathtub. We can turn them on and we can turn them off. That's what we do. That's what his staff does, and they, you know, it's beautiful, and it's designed to be naturalistic, with coves and plants and rocks.
And woods and lakes
everything.
and swamps, and some of them are open and some of them are very closed, and we'll talk about some of them. Let's look at this, at the book. Essentially, what you've got is you've broken the book up into 5 sets of streets, and in a sense, you're walking uptown. Talk about the various spots that we would see on this little tour. I mean, let's say your 2 favorite spots from 59th to 65th Street. I mean, it's tough, I understand.
It is tough, but what I say, the pond, you come in immediately and there is this amazing water body, and the minute you cross over that wall into the park, you are immediately in the country.
Yeah.
There is no sign of any kind except maybe the lights at night, that electricity. But you're in this beautiful, bucolic, pastoral landscape, and you're looking at a woodland, the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, and all of that noise completely disappears in the chaos, and you have grass and trees and benches and beautiful floral plantings. And, you know, you feel, even there, you can see a sense of infinity, which is what Olmsted and Vaux, the designers, wanted you to feel.
Okay, you're walking uptown.
And so then you pass the beautiful dairy, which is one of the Conservancy's visitor centers now. It was originally what I would call a fast food restaurant for the park, but a charming, charming Victorian building. Then you cross over the transverse road, of course, without even realizing that traffic is going underneath you. It's the first use of the word subways.
Oh, okay.
It's
this is
hyphenated.
A little etymology here, as well as art history.
So that's really a very important part of the park, the transverse roads, because they took the traffic and the noise and the feeling of the city out of the park so that you would have a continuous single work of art in front of you. And then you get to the mall, which is the most important horticultural feature in the park, the quadruple row of American elms that no other place has like this. Of course, there's another row on 5th Avenue, but the mall is the only straight line in Central Park, designed to be the only straight line.
In a city that's a grid.
That's a grid, and the idea was to forget the grid. So therefore, the mall is the only straight line, and it leads you to Bethesda Terrace, and boom, you're
Fabulous.
at this
You
brilliant architectural masterpiece.
Right. And you, in both books, look at the terrace as this multiply magnificent work of art, from the grandeur of the actual terrace looking out to the sculpture. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about the book is not only do you deal with the iconic, but you deal with the unknown and the obscure, the statuary, the carvings. Talk about that. Talk about the statues.
Okay, well, the first one that comes to mind is Balto. Balto is the dog.
The dog.
And why is he in Central Park? People always ask that question, and the answer is because people in New York, when Balto, the real dog in 1925, was the lead sled dog to bring the anti-serum to Nome, Alaska. You know, now there's a statue of Balto in Alaska. But the people all over the world were listening to this relay race in 1925 on the radio, and everyone was, you know, trying to make sure that this medicine saved the lives of the children in Nome, Alaska, and New Yorkers decided to erect a dog statue to Balto.
And you've got statues of every major ethnic group, and in a sense, it almost looks like it was meant to socialize the masses, that they each had their heroes in the park. And is that part of the history of the park, that it's used for political purposes like that?
Well, one of the most important things, there are those statues you walk by, Beethoven, Schiller, Thomas More, Mazzini. There, you know, these busts on a pedestal, you go, yeah, whatever.
Right.
I mean, they're all over the place,
Right.
and you don't think about them as being important other than to memorialize a person. But Central Park is the first place of public park that actually has people from different ethnic groups. In French parks, there are French statues. In Britain, there are British statues. In Italy, there are Italian statues. Central Park is where the melting pot comes together. It's one of the actual subtle notes of it as a democratic public space.
Okay, let's go there. The three of us. You argue, certainly in this book, that not only was the park a work of art, but it's an idea, almost a physical manifestation of a political or civic ideology. And that was in the minds of the original architects. Talk about it as sort of this democratizing space or democratic space. Sarah and then Doug.
Okay, well, the park, the idea didn't come from Olmsted and Vaux. They won the competition. But it was the city fathers and leaders and political leaders before them that in 1853 said we need a public space, and they took the land from the state legislature to take it out of the tax base and to make it a public park because immigration was coming in. People were not getting along with the new immigrants, which were basically the German and the Irish. People were beginning to flee into the well-to-do, into their own spaces like Gramercy Park that still has a key. Only for the people who live in it. And that was the way New York was headed. And a lot of social thinkers said, this is not the way, this is America. This is not what was supposed to happen. There were tremendous health problems. We had the worst infant mortality in America. And so a lot of social thinkers and visionaries came together and said, we need a public park, even more than libraries, universities, museums. What defines a great city is a great park, and that's when the business community got behind it, and they spent $5 million to buy the land.
Doug, not only was the park a political act, and in a sense a political football. I mean, some of the great characters, Fernando Wood, Boris Tweed. But right now, I would think, Doug, that you've got one of the toughest jobs in the city because the park is like the third rail. Don't touch my park. Or let me touch it, but let me do it my way. Talk sort of about the politics of being the Central Park administrator and the pressures and the concerns.
Well, it's a huge challenge, but I think fortunately, New Yorkers actually are the ones, when it comes down to it, protect the park. Because we do take everything we do in Central Park to all the community boards that sit on the park. So we're there as the stewards and the protectors of the park, but today when people want to do something in the park or they want to build something in the park, we say, hey, listen, we don't think that this will work, but if we want to take it out to the public and get their opinion, and boom, the public speaks up quickly. And I think now more than ever in the park's 152 years, it's the most beautiful and it's better managed than ever. And I think people are finally really getting it. And we're at that point. We've broken those cycles of decline that has plagued the park for the 150 years prior to the Conservancy. And I think people now are more protective than ever of the park.
Do folks know about the park? I would think that New Yorkers know Central Park and cherish it, but do New Yorkers understand the state of the park, how the park operates, your role in it institutionally?
No, they definitely don't. And I think what's very important about Sarah's book is if everybody understood it as a masterpiece of landscape architecture, and also one of the greatest engineering feats as well, I think people would appreciate it. I mean, Olmsted, there's a great quote from Olmsted in 1870 saying, "The park has gone to the dogs, and I don't think I can ever take it back." And then it was
it's always going to the dogs, though, in some people's minds.
In some people's minds, sure. But breaking that cycle of decline and restore is really what is so important to us. And the Conservancy, we have a $35 million a year budget, and 85% of that comes from the private sector. People that live around the park support the park.
Go ahead.
People don't. We have about 35,000 members, and there's about 330,000 households within a 10-minute walk. Once people realize it's the Conservancy that has to raise the preponderance of the money and do the work in the park, they want to get on board.
Right, because I guess most people believe that it is a public entity in terms of its management, the Department of Parks and Recreation, not a nonprofit like your folks. Let's move off sort of the politics and the business end of it. What's your most magical spot?
My most magical spot, well, you know, that's like which of your 10 children is your favorite? But,
which one of your 10 children is your favorite?
I think the spot when I bring people up to the North Woods and that we are working on, and we have this beautiful cascade. And when I describe to you, come under Huddlestone Arch, which is these boulders that look like Humpty Dumpty, like they're either just been put together or they're falling down, but they're not. They've been there since 1866. And you come under it and you see this cascade, and it's this beautiful water body. And what you're really looking at is this gorgeous picture, not unlike the Hudson River School paintings that were influencing.
You look at the paintings and you look at your photographs, and there's a real commonality. Was it intentional?
Oh, it was very intentional. That's what they meant by being a work of art, that they were seeped in. Calvert Vaux's brother-in-law was actually one of the painters of the Hudson River School, and Frederick Church, the major painter of the Hudson River School, was a commissioner of Central Park and a third cousin of Olmsted. So it was all in the soup, the cultural soup, to have these beautiful scenes. And when you're looking at that water body, that beautiful cascade, it's a concrete wall with artfully shaped boulders hiding the wall, and New York City drinking water flowing over it. I mean, people are blown away. And I love that moment when they say, you know, because through my tours, we get up to the North End, and I keep saying the park's a work of art. And when they stand there, they go, we get it.
Oh, that's great. Your favorite spot?
I don't know if it's a spot as much as a period of time. You know,
Go ahead.
The park is so busy. We have 35 million visitors that come into Central Park, making it one of the most visited public spaces in the world. You know, I love it this time of the year, late at night, when it's snowing, when no one's in it.
Right.
I get it to myself, which is rare.
You're greedy.
And very. And driving through with my hybrid late at night, and you know, when there's no leaves on the trees and you can see the lights from one end to the end, you really understand the undulation in the landforms. And when it's all leafed out and there's millions of people in the park, you don't really get to enjoy that beauty. And it's the serenity of this time of the year, because you also know spring is right around the corner, and this is our last chance to enjoy the park, and it's ours.
Ooh, nice. Talk about what's happened since 2003, since you've been in here in the park, and talk about the Conservancy's major activities, you know, Tavern on the Green, et cetera, et cetera. What's changed in the 7 years since we last talked?
Well, we have done a major campaign that has restored the entire shoreline of the lake, which we had not been touched, only in tiny little segments, since Olmsted and Vaux designed it. And so, you know, it is beautiful. It used to be eroded. It used to really be in bad shape. Now it has gorgeous plantings. There was a section called Bankrock Bay that was, you know, you couldn't even see that. It was water. It was covered with weeds and Phragmites, which are those tall weeds that are the sign of an unhealthy landscape. We've opened it up, and it's still and even more important for birding and birds and wildlife. And this beautiful oak bridge, which is the first bridge that we actually built from scratch.
Wow.
Not restored, but rebuilt from historic photographs and plans.
You've been around with some great events, you know, the Gates, the 9/11 Remembrance, the Marathon, the Papal Mass. You've had some concerts, Garth Brooks, Dave Matthews, Sheryl Crow. Talk about what's going on right now. What are the major efforts that the Conservancy is involved in right now with the park?
The big restoration efforts we're looking at doing right now is, people don't realize we have 21 playgrounds in Central Park. And over the last 25 years, we've actually restored every playground. But you know, we need to go back now and look at some of the ones that were done 15 and 20 years ago. You know, we want to make them more fun. We want to make them safer. We want to make them more accessible to all children. And there's a lot of new, really cool, sustainable concepts out there that we need to bring into the playground. So bringing the playgrounds up to date is crucial for us over the next 5 to 10 years.
What about Tavern on the Green?
Tavern on the Green is a really cool story right now. Unfortunately, there is no major restaurant in there, but working with the City of New York and the Department of Design and Construction and Parks, we've actually opened a really cool, beautiful visitor center and gift shop. And we have a food court in the middle where the old Crystal Room was. So we want people to come in and see Tavern, and we've opened it up to the park. Before it was closed off, there was vegetation around it. You barely knew it's there.
Right.
I think it's one of the great iconic architectural structures in New York City.
What are you going to do with it? Or what gets done with it?
Right, I don't know. Right now we want to see how it goes. We open it up in October. I think it's a great opportunity for us to watch how the gift shop goes, watch how the visitor center goes, watch the food courts, and then get a sense of what we want to do next. But we're not in any rush.
Okay. We've got a little bit more than a minute. Future of Central Park from your perspective, given the city's fiscal situation and general economic conditions. I mean, look ahead.
You know, it's challenging, but I got to tell you, one thing that was really positive over the last few years with a tough economy, our foundation and corporate support has gone down, okay? But you know what was great? Our individual giving, which is the bulk of the money that we get, has actually stayed strong and gone up. So if people participate and join the Conservancy, become members of the Conservancy, we have a bright future.
Sara, what's next for you? What are you writing? What are you photographing?
Okay, well, in May, I'll have another book, a third book by Abrams, in collaboration with Abrams, Strawberry Fields, Central Park's Memorial to John Lennon. It's the 25th anniversary of the spot, and it's an International Garden of Peace, and this book explains everything from that spot before it was even a park, right up until Yoko's vision and Bruce Kelly, who was the landscape architect, and it was the beginning of the Conservancy. No one realizes John Lennon was killed only 5 days after after the first board meeting of the Central Park.
And what else? I mean, you're always working on more than. Is there another book?
Yeah, there'll be a book that doesn't have a publisher yet. It isn't even written, but is called Central Park Secrets and Stories.
Ooh,
and
so you have to come back.
That's the one that everybody wants to hear always, the journalists. What are the secrets and stories? And it's like, well, I'm going to make money from my secrets and stories for the Conservancy. I'm not giving it away for
That's
free.
right. And you don't even have to tell me until after it's published.
Okay.
My thanks to Sara Cedar Miller and Doug Blonsky for taking us on a grand tour of this New York world treasure. See you next week. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.